Hi, I'm Michelle Dye from the Stockholm Resilience Centre.
And I'm Leti Sangonyeni from the Graduate School of Business at the University of Cape Town.
And we're having a conversation today about gender inequality and international development. So, Nadisa, let's talk about this persistent problem of gender inequality that we've had so many decades now. Firstly, understanding that there's a problem and lots of different measures to try and bring about gender equality, but still, despite that, across countries, regardless of economic status, across cultures, we still have this really persistent and systematic gender inequality to the detriment of women.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, and I think it was Audre Lorde, and in relation to racism and homophobia, who says that famous quote that says that we can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Yes, exactly. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house.
That quote, what it tells us is that we can't look to the system that's created the toxicity, the imbalance, the disharmony. We can't look to its rules, its understandings, its paradigm in order to try and fix it. We need to find a way of seeing the system that we're in a different way. We need a rethinking, new ways of understanding the situation, and then move from there in terms of trying to fix it.
Yes, exactly, yes. So, and the way I think about this is the shape of the institution. So, you're calling it the system, and we think the shape of the institution, the shape of our academic institutions, the shape of our governing institutions, parliament, that the shape of these institutions, we can't just put women into them to fix gender inequality, because it's that is the master's tools, as you say, like that institution was built by men for men. Putting women into it isn't going to change the shape necessarily. Exactly. So, what are some other ways we can think about how to break out of being stuck in these same pathways of doing things, of thinking about things, the stories we tell about gender and gender inequality?
Well, systems thinking, I think, has quite a bit of direction in terms of how we could get there. It conceives of these systems, of the institution, as something that's complex. It's not simple, it's not complicated, it's not something that has an instructable that, if applied, in the right conditions, will lead to this
not
outcome.
Linear.
Yes, yeah. It conceives of the system or the shape of the institution as something that's complex, and as such, it's not necessarily going to respond to just one. There's no silver bullet that's going to fix whatever the conundrum is, and on top of which, you might start to. Even the actors who are part of that system might not have the same understanding of what the conundrum is as well, right? It makes me think of an example in South Delhi, very brutal rape that happened, gang rape that happened on a bus, right? That happened, and everyone who was part of that system, and nationally, internationally, all agreed that this was something that was unacceptable and needed to be changed. However, when different groups came out and started to speak about it, they were framing their understanding of what the problem is in different ways. So one group was taking quite a paternalistic approach, and it was the dominant group, I think, that was saying that we need to protect our women. And this radical feminist and probably quite younger group was saying, no, the framing of the problem is not around protecting us. We frame the problem around a need for us to have increased agency. We need to be able to take on risk in the same way that other kind of groups within our society are able to right now. So what we have there are within one system, there's a paradox in terms of the understanding of the problem. And what systems thinking enables us to do is to try and hold that paradox and articulate that paradox within the problem, and then try and move towards finding a solution where both can be true.
Yeah, I think the appealing thing too about systems thinking is that it allows you to look between and across scales, from the small scale, everyday, interpersonal relations, through which our gender categories are reinforced, recreated, very dynamic, all the way up to what are the institutions, formal and informal, that govern the large patterns of movement in our lives, what we get access to, what we're able to, what opportunities we're able to take up. You know, that systems thinking allows you to go both up and down these scales and also across and between them.
And I guess what we really want to do is come up with some kind of movement that is going to change the system so that deficit isn't there, I guess. We'll never necessarily get to that point, but if we're trying to come up with an intervention that's working across these scales, so not just looking at legislature, but maybe looking at legislature at the same time looking at deeply held cultural beliefs and values that are behind and holding up legislature. So if we're working at both of those at the same time, or in close sequence with each other, in conversation with each other, then we're in a better position to actually perhaps move ourselves towards transforming the system as we ourselves are transformed within the system as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thinking about transformation and what you're saying there about this movement through scales, I think the hashtag #MeToo movement is a really good example of how the system, we're actually transform, that there's something transformational about that movement, the inertia that was present in this persistent sexual harassment towards women, and then how that became, you know, there have been for many years women standing up and speaking out about their experience, but there was just so much inertia, you know, that it would be harmful for your job prospects, for example, if you made a sexual harassment claim at work, or that it was just a normal part of your life as a woman to expect to be catcalled on the street. That was normal. And then the Me Too movement really bringing this momentum, this to the whole understanding and creating really a language and a space in which this could be spoken about on a very wide spectrum across cultures, across the world, you know, and social media, of course, being a real enabler in bringing this conversation to this stage.
I think with what contributed to that groundswell being created with the Me Too movement as well is that it was people occupying different strata of society as well, all saying the same thing. And I think social media enabled, you know, them to all speak under one hashtag, or us to speak all under one hashtag. But I guess where I'm going with this is that I think that groundswell can also be created when the stories are being said at different levels of what we strata of society. And what I think the Me Too movement also did is that it gave us language around how to talk about it, but it also gave us language around how to respond. It's giving us, it's still happening, right? But it's giving us an opportunity to work out the ways to respond to these disruptions, negative disruptions, which I think is quite, there are instances where the Me Too movement has also, like, I've no doubt it's happening not just on social media. You know, there are organizations and institutions that aren't using the hashtag, but where women are now saying this has happened, more women are able to, they can.
Yeah, that's what it means by creating space, I think. It sounds a little bit abstract to talk about creating space, but I think that's actually an example of the creation of transformational space, where previously you couldn't speak out, or there was no space for movement in the dynamic. Suddenly now there's space for something to change.
One of the things that I think just brings in so much possibility in terms of thinking on a systems level is that it allows for increased agency. Once you're able to acknowledge that the system that we're in it's tricky, it's elusive, it's not something that can just be, controlled in one specific way. Once you come to appreciate that, and once you come to appreciate that, oh right, the futility that I've felt as I've hit my head against this wall over and over again is totally understandable. And once you also come to appreciate that there are other ways of actually kind of looking at that same system, almost rising above it, not rising above it, but almost moving from a place of I'm in a system and it is oppressing me, it's excluding me, it's to a place of okay, this is where there's some possibility. There's some possibility, a space to move into that could move towards transforming it as well. So I think agency is created as well, which is really key and important.
Exactly, that's part of the transformation, I think, and the transformational space. It's part of this, the new narrative, the new discourse, the possibility for action. So much more to talk about, obviously, and encouraging signs that we can move this conversation forward. And thank you so much for joining us, Nadisa.
Thank you.